Welcome, everyone. We're just letting everyone in now. So thank you for joining us this morning. A couple of familiar faces from the rest of the Farmers Footprint team. Thanks for joining. My name's Elle. I am coming to you from Sydney, Australia this morning. I sit on both the Farmers Footprint Australia and USA team. So yeah, please feel free to intro yourself in the chat. Everyone will be kept on mute for the duration of the conversation. At the end, we'll have some time for questions. So yeah, please save those, or please voice your comments in the chat as well, and we'll come back to those at the end. So hopefully everyone's just about in now. To kick us off, I'd like to just take a moment to ground ourselves where we are. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming to you from today. I'm coming to you from Sydney, Australia, which is the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. So I want to express my gratitude for the enduring custodianship and the connection to country, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to any First Peoples that might be joining us on this call today. So thank you all for being here. I mentioned at the start, my name's Elle. I'm on the Farmers Footprint Australia and USA team, and I'm happy to be here with you today to hold space for this really important conversation. The intention of this webinar is to centre farmer voices and to elevate the stories around farmers' mental health. This is part of our mental health awareness campaign that we're running for the month of May. We hope that whether you're joining as a consumer or as a farmer, that this conversation will be really conducive to supporting our land stewards in the amazing work that they do. So I want to introduce the amazing farmers that we have joining us today for this conversation. And thank them for taking the time to step off the farm and into the Zoom chair to be with us and to share their experiences and their perspectives. As I mentioned, this is part of our Farmers Mental Health Awareness campaign. So it's part of a fundraising effort that we are holding to provide direct support and resources to farmers who might be struggling with mental health. We'll be sharing those links on how you can either participate as a consumer and how you can apply for that direct support as a farmer, no matter where you're based. So we have a few different options that we'll go over later in the chat as well. So I might start by getting Gail and Lynnette to introduce themselves, a little bit of their background, and to speak about how mental health has played a factor in their farming lives, and share with you their journey so far.
Thanks, and thanks everybody for joining us and taking time out of your day. We are in Southeast Kansas. I have spent my whole life in agriculture, grew up on a family farm in Kansas. And also, I guess I should start by saying I've been kind of blessed to get a lot of different perspectives in my life of agriculture, growing up on a typical Kansas grain livestock farm. By the time I started, my brother and I took it over. I moved it to the fourth largest farm in the county, 3,200 acres of Roundup Ready corn and soybeans. Today, Lynnette and I are on 162 acres, direct marketing, grass-finished beef, and lamb, pork, chicken, etc. So I've kind of gone full circle. And so I get to see agriculture through a whole lot of different lenses and perspectives. So that's, I think it's been an interesting journey that I've been on. I'm old, as you can see, which means I went through the 80s, which was a major debacle in large-scale agriculture, watched a lot of our friends lose their farms in the 80s, watched my parents, Lynnette's parents, suffer mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, but find a way to survive, but bloodied and beat up when they did. I finally fell off the wagon of large scale ag in the late 90s, early 2000s. And in doing so, I ended up divorced. I ended up at odds with the government and crop insurance. I ended up losing my farm, led me into deep depression. I lost my brother in a farm accident during that time, which didn't help. And thoughts of suicide became pretty common. So I've had quite the journey physically, mentally, and spiritually, and looking forward to sharing the rest of my story later.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you. And Lynnette, did you want to add anything?
I just, yeah, same, very similar story in that, you know, watched all of the things that happened, you know, in the 80s when a lot of our friends and family lost farms. We definitely witnessed a lot of pain. Most of the time, one of the people on the farm had to go get a job in town. Both of our parents, Gail's dad, you know, became a rural mail carrier, and so did my mother when I was age 11. So some huge changes happened. And of course, mental health and depression is very strong in my family. My dad is a manic depressive, and I lost a brother this last year to suicide. So deeply touched by this. And feel very strongly about how important it is, you know, to develop that community, to have those resources available, and just learning where they are and how to do that, because I would have never known without the experiences I've had.
Thank you, Lynnette. Thank you for sharing that really raw and vulnerable family history that you have, and for being with us here today to help us shift some of this stigma that often surrounds farmers speaking about mental health. So from there, I'll go to you, Clara, if you'd also like to introduce yourself and a brief history.
Thank you, Elle. And yes, thanks for everyone for showing up today. So I'm Clara Coleman. I'm based in Maine, and I was born into the original, or one of the earlier Back to the Land movements of the 1970s. So my father is Elliot Coleman, and my mother, Sue Lawrence Putnam now. They were followers of Helen and Scott Nearing, that were the pioneers of that Back to the Land movement. And as amazing as Helen and Scott were, I wouldn't say they really focused a lot on self-care and mental health, but they were incredibly inspirational, and they're part of my family story of how my father started farming in Maine in the 1970s. So I like to say I grew up learning farming through osmosis, and I really just absorbed everything that was around me, the good and the bad. My life journey has been definitely quite mixed. I spent many years trying to get away from farming. I didn't really think that there was a place for me in it when I was younger, but I always loved plants and I loved food. And I loved being outside, and I loved athletics. And so all of those things eventually came together, and I started a farm with my partner in Colorado in 2009. And that was sort of my family liked to joke that it was Four Season Farm West, because it was in Colorado, and it really replicated everything that my father had done in Maine, movable greenhouses, year-round production, all of the sort of cold hardy techniques that my dad had pioneered, we did in Colorado. But the sad story of that is, as I like to say, that even though my partner and I spent so much time, you know, creating all this beauty around us with the farm, we neglected to cultivate and foster the beauty between us and within us. So our relationship fell apart, farm fell apart, and in many ways kind of replicated and mimicked what my parents had gone through in the 1970s. So I founded Real Farmer Care, and I can get into more about that later, but that is my small nonprofit to support farmer well-being and self-care. And right now there are 555 recipients from around the US. They represent 42 states, and they have received a $100 self-care award to put towards any self-care activity they're choosing. So that's sort of the foundation of the program, and I'd like to expand it into ongoing programming and support, like free online therapy, massage and bodywork stipends, fitness care, all the other things that farmers desperately need to have a long career in farming. So yeah, happy to really feel honored and yeah, delighted to be here and talk more about all of that. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Clara. And then Stuart, our lucky last, if you can tell us a bit about yourself and your farming journey so far.
How you going? Am I clicked over?
Yeah, you are. We've got
Yeah.
you.
I'm Stuart McWilliam. I'm a first generation farmer. I've grown up with pretty much no agricultural experience. So I've been out of school since I was 15. I wasn't the most best behaved kid, so I was asked to leave when I was 15. I wasn't meant to be in school. Couldn't really read or write. Did a trade in plumbing. From a trade in plumbing, I become an arborist and I climbed trees for 10 years, ended up doing a diploma in arboriculture. Very stressful, high risk industries. Come across regenerative agriculture when we leased some more land to expand our tree business, and we bought some cows. And from buying a few cows and listening to Charlie Arnott's podcast, one thing led to another, and we ended up selling the tree business, buying a farm, did the 4-day Tarwin Park natural sequence farming course, and fell in love with Stuart's principles and what Peter's vision was with the Australian landscape. And we ended up sort of packing everything up and buying a caravan, and we've got a semi-trailer with earth moving equipment, and now we work all over Australia fixing the hydrology and biology on farms that need a bit of help. So that's sort of a bit of a background with me, and I'll touch on the mental health side later on.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you again all for being here with us to share these perspectives today. So we might move into the next question then, which is, what do you see as the primary stresses or challenges impacting farmers? The unique set of challenges that they face as an industry, and then particularly those that consumers or people who aren't actually in the industry might not be aware of, not be so obvious. Stuart, I might go back to you because you mentioned you've had some pretty challenging working environments. And so what's your journey been with that so far?
I think a big thing that I've come across in agriculture, so I don't have a background in agriculture. I've been farming for 5 years, and 5 years ago, I still remember pulling over on the side of the road and Googling what a steer and a heifer was. So I come into this industry green as green with no idea. I've learned a lot from God knows how many hours of podcasts and YouTube. And something that's blown me away is the debt that a farmer can carry, and then how you can say have a herd of cattle and you grow your steers and your heifers out and you put them onto a truck and you send them, in most cases, you send them off to a sale yard, not knowing what you're going to be paid for the last 12 months of your work. And you wait for a phone call from your agent to tell you, whether you made a good quid for the year or not, or in the cropping instances where you're putting a crop in the ground and you're not knowing what the weather's going to do, you're not knowing the grain prices at the end of that you're bearing that stress, on our shoulders for that whole year to then find out what we're going to be paid. That's a lot. You've got that stress. Are you paying for boarding school for your children? Can you make car repayments and stuff like that? I say to people from the city, it's like going and working for your boss, and at the Christmas party, your boss determines how much he's going to pay you with how he feels on the day. That's what it's like being a farmer growing commodities, and that stress, that's a lot to bear on a husband and wife's shoulders when you're feeding a family and putting a roof over children's heads and sending them to school.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very unique way. There's no other industry, I guess, that we can think of that works in that sort of backwards system. And that's something the consumer, when they're paying for their vegetables at the supermarket, that's something that's definitely not registering for them, that whole journey of what that farmer went through to get that food into that place so that it can be on our plates.
Yeah.
Gail, Lynnette, would you like to also share your thoughts on what you see as those primary stresses and challenges that farmers are facing?
You wanna go?
I'll let you start.
Yeah, first of all, just ditto to everything that Stuart said. Farming is the only profession I know where we buy everything retail and sell everything wholesale. And that's a difficult way to make a living. I think for me, and I'm going to talk a little bit to large scale ag here in the beginning, but it would probably go across the board at any scale. Lack of support for farmers in the mental health realm. I mean, there's a lack of support for farmers across the board, but when it comes to their physical and mental health, there is no help out here. What help is out here is mostly backed by big ag and industry that's put them in this place to begin with. And especially on the mental health side, admitting to anyone outside of maybe the spouse that there is a problem opens up a vulnerability that puts their entire farm at risk. It's like putting blood in the water and turning into sharks. Neighbors will try to wrench your ground away from you. You're the talk of the coffee shop, and there's really no way a farmer can let any of this out. So they carry it with them. And today, we opened up talking about the 80s, and we can go back to grandpa and great grandpa and grandma in the Depression in the 30s. Farmers are carrying 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 generations of trauma, stress, and burden into today. And we're just at a breaking point where we just can't carry it to the next generation. And, there's plenty of evidence out there. Farmers are anywhere from 3 to 5 times more likely to commit suicide than the average American. It's easy to see why once you spend a couple of days in rural America.
For sure. Clara, did you want to add to that as well?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to add, but I think the simplest thing for consumers to understand is burnout. So common in the farming profession. And because the farm is like a child, it just takes and takes and takes. And there's just never a point at which you can stop, so to speak. So the constant need of a farm is endless. So it's really difficult to develop healthy boundaries within that profession. And this is beyond all the economic, challenges and the weather, unpredictable weather, climate change, all of that. This is just like, how do you operate as a farmer and expect to have this career that has this trajectory of, growth and then retirement? It is really, really difficult to do that well. And as Gail said, the lack of support, especially on the mental health piece, is huge. So the stigma is huge too. Not enough time, not enough money, the judgment, and very difficult to prioritize your own well-being. So
definitely. And so off the back of that, I guess you've all had your own personal experience and challenges with mental health in your farming journeys. What have been areas where you have been able to find relief or support? We've sort of acknowledged, we recognize that for farmers, and Gail, you said not just mental health, but in, finance, physical health, family support, all of those areas, there's a severe lack for farmers, partly based on their rural geographic locations, partly based on policy. There's a lot of shifts in leadership and things happening across the globe for all of our regions. So where have you been able to find relief or support? Or what changes or habits have you been able to implement in your own lives, in your own experience, to sort of, make it through those challenging times and, see the light at the end? I might go to you first, Stuart, just to touch on what's been, some habits or things that you've been able to implement or access in your journey.
So my biggest struggles that jumped to mind was back in the day when I had a couple of businesses running and, plumber, arborist, and a few things happening. And when my depression was the worst, was the alcohol consumption, the partying, the shit food. Like, sorry for the language, but I went to the doctor, got sent to another doctor, and was prescribed antidepressants, 2 tablets that I could take. I was told I could take them every day for the rest of my life. And not at one point was I ever asked, how was I sleeping? What was I eating? What was I doing for work? Was I enjoying what I was doing for work? This is before I was married with children. And now what I know now is, one, I've found my passion, and my passion is farming and natural sequence farming. And I'm actually a few days past being sober for 12 months. It took a long time to remove alcohol out of my life, but the issues that I've had with my mental health and the connections with alcohol and the excessive consumption and drinking alcohol on your own to mask the pain and not deal with things. Sleep, working 2 jobs and not sleeping properly and eating shit food. Like, I look at all these things when I was prescribed antidepressants that I was never asked about. And now we know the connections with our diet and our sleep, exercise, and finding finding a group that you can connect with. And my group that I connect with is regenerative agriculture in Australia. And it doesn't need to be a huge group, but as long as you've got a few people that you can bounce ideas off with farming and what we're doing with the earth moving side of things. And I've got a couple of good friends that when things get pretty tough, I can, as they say, just take a few bricks off your shoulder and, crunch some problems and go over things and get through it without, being on the medical train when I was told that I could take them forever. And that's something that bugs me, that as a doctor, I would have thought doctors have our best interest at heart. And I'm disappointed that those questions aren't being asked. And there's people out there being prescribed medication that they could, they've been told that they could take forever. Why don't we get a bit more sleep? Why don't we look at our diet and say, look, cut the fast food out, start, going to the farmer's market. There's so much depression out there that could be healed with food and connection. And we need to look more into that.
Definitely. I'll move to Gail and Lynnette, just to get your experience as well on, what's been integral in habit or lifestyle or amazing resources you have been able to seek out to help you on your journey.
So for us, it was one step at a time. We grew up in a time where we had 3 gardens. When I grew up, we had a milk cow. We had all of these things. And as, agriculture changed, all of these things left. And how do you return to what you know is right? Producing food that is healthy for yourself and for your family. And so one step at a time, we just started changing our diet back to what we knew was right. And with those changes, so did our health improve. And then the connection with other farmers. We were part of a group of a peer group for farmers. And then we also started another group for us to talk about these things and to visit about those things, but also to share a meal. Food is the most important when you're talking about mental health, but also when you talk about, farmers need community, and we've lost that, especially in the rural areas. And so how do you reform that community? And it may not look like what it used to look like. All of our farmers that farm similar to us don't live next door to us. They live a little ways away, usually within an hour. And so, yeah, at a minimum, I guess, within an hour. And so, yeah, we've created a group of farmers that are all wanting to heal themselves. But not just farmers. We included school teachers and chefs and plumbers, and there's a variety of people all in our group, and the story's the same, right? It's the same when it comes to mental health, is that, you change how you consume food, you change how you buy food, and that everything that we do, we know affects all of it. And so we try to, we really, truly try to support other regenerative farmers that grow those things that we need. Because we know that every time we vote with our food dollar, we have our power. That is our power to make those choices.
Definitely. And Gail, could you talk to how the Fuller Field School, which is part of supporting our mental health campaign this month with an amazing offering, and how that plays into offering that to the community?
Yeah, so Lynnette and I, with the help of Dr. Jill Clapperton, started Fuller Field School in 2012. Initially, it was launched as a 2-day cover crop workshop, cover crop / soil health. However, two things happened in year one. First of all, Jill was adamant that we were going to source as much food as we could locally. Anybody that goes to an ag conference in America, whether it's a conventional ag conference or a regenerative ag conference, the food is crap. It's worse than what Stuart's talking about. And what we're talking about, healing ourselves and eating complete shit. So that was change number one at our workshop. And then in 2012, I was turning 50 that year, had been in farming my whole life. And Jill was one of the presenters, and she gave one of her presentations on food. And at the age of 50, it was the first time in my life I'd been at an ag conference that talked about food. And the irony of that statement hit me like a ton of bricks. How could I go 50 years without talking about food at a farming conference? And so the field school took a really hard turn in year one. And after that, it came into a real deep dive into the carbon, water, mineral cycles, energy flow, and the connections of soil and human, and nature and human. And we've grown from there. By the early 2000s, I'd lost my farm, and we moved in 2019. And, the field school just kind of became, each year it was like our personal journey of what we were studying that year, whether it was the water cycle or diet or whatever. And we brought a nutritionist, Sarah Keogh, and, the God Mistress of Soul Health, Nicole Masters, in 2021. And I had fell off the deep end with my mental health. I had recovered, the diet and all those things that helped, but I totally collapsed in 21. And so I knew it was time for me to come out of the closet, so to speak. And I had to tell my story. And Nicole had published her book, For the Love of Soil, right before she came to the conference. And the last chapter of the book challenged regenerative agriculture. How can we talk about healing farms if we're not talking about healing farmers? And it really clicked for me. And that Nicole in that chapter was really laid the groundwork for Lynnette and I starting the group that she was talking about, Regenerate Me, which is a small, like a peer group that we now meet and discuss mental health. So, the school has taken on a life of its own this year by complete coincidence. One of the speakers is Zach Bush. You guys may have heard of him. And we're going to be discussing the connection of land and humans at the cellular level, and how we're connected with land and nature, whether we like it or not, whether we agree or not, or want to be or not. We are all one, and that's going to be the big focus on this year's school.
Amazing. And you've connected with Zach before, and I've heard some amazing conversations that the two of you have had. So we should be able to link those for anyone that hasn't caught them yet. There's a link to an amazing Vimeo, Ordinary Soil, which we'll be able to share from a couple of years ago. And more recently, I had the pleasure of listening to you, Gail, and Zach on his Instagram. And I know that's posted on his grid. So we might be able to dig that up and share it with you all as well, for those who unfortunately can't get along to the field school this year. I'll go to Clara next, just for us to talk a bit more about Real Farmer Care and how you're supporting farmers' mental health through that service and what that has looked like. And yeah, you mentioned earlier sort of the vision for that evolving. We'd love to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, I'm just gonna back up, and because my answer to the last question, I'm half joking when I say that what's improved my mental health and self-care the most is not actively farming at the moment. So, and I say that, tongue in cheek, because I founded Real Farmer Care while I was farming, and I have sort of two stories to explain why I founded it. I have my tidy, sort of neat story, and then I have a messier, complicated story. So the tidy story is that in 2016, as a single mom with two young boys, I moved back to my family farm up in Harborside to Four Season Farm to help my dad run the farm and figure out sort of the future of the farm. And it's got, beautiful parts and also really hard parts. But throughout, the 6+ years that I was up there, the one constant that I could never seem to escape from, or it was this constant sense of burnout, as I mentioned before. No matter how hard I tried, I just always felt like I was on the edge of burnout. And it baffled me, because here was this incredibly established farm, all the infrastructure, all the supposed support that I thought I needed, incredible food, but the mental health piece was just sort of non-existent. And it wasn't like built into the fabric of the farm. And that was something that I felt was missing. So in January of 2020, as a New Year's resolution, which is sort of funny, I was like, well, maybe the way to help myself is to help other farmers. I thought other farmers must be experiencing similar things. And so I started Real Farmer Care as a crowdfunding campaign. So it was just on GoFundMe. And I reached out to a handful of farmer friends saying, hey, would you like to receive $100 to put towards a self-care activity, share a photo, a few sentences about what you feel is important to you for farmer self-care. And we'll put it on social media and sort of like try to start this campaign, try to get more farmers to talk about this. Because for me, it felt like no one was talking about this, and we needed to talk about it. Farmers, in my opinion, needed to be given the permission to take care of themselves and not look at self-care as this luxury or as this sort of like selfish thing, that it's really maintenance care. It is essential care for farmers. So that was sort of the genesis of it, and it has grown from there. But on a more personal level, the messier story is that I was literally born into a family farm tragedy. And the summer of 1976, 7 years after my mom and dad had carved a farm out of, spruce forest, 2 inches of topsoil, and just when the farm was starting to gain a lot of recognition and notoriety, my sister Heidi, who was 3.5 years old at the time, drowned in the farm pond. So I was 2.5 months old. And as you can imagine, it ruined my parents' relationship. The heartbreak was so devastating, the farm fell apart. And so as a child, having been born into that, I essentially lost my family farm early on. And I always wonder, and of course I know I'll never know the answer to this question in this lifetime, but my wonder is if my parents had received the type of care and support when they were first building the farm or after, after Heidi passed, could things have turned out differently for the farm, for our family? I know I'll never know. But what I do know is that, beyond these unspeakable tragedies, that those are the things that we seem to talk about, hopefully. But beyond those unspeakable tragedies, we need that care and support for farmers for all of the silent kind of, stressors that just build up slowly over time that end up, crippling a farmer later on. So that is the mission. That is why I want farmers to feel supported, is because that is the stuff that is underneath all of the big tragedies that could happen. So I really wanted to find ways to support farmers through just all the ongoing stressors. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that messy story as well, Clara, and for letting us connect with you on that level and that vulnerability. And it's amazing work that you're doing with Real Farmer Care, and we're really grateful to partner with you this month to bring this amazing resource to more farmers across the country. And we'll go into a little more detail on how farmers can access those offerings at the end of the call. But I wanted to bring us back to something as well that you touched on, Gail, when you were speaking of the next Fuller Field School that you're holding with Zach Bush, and how you will be exploring and connecting on that more cellular level of how we as humans connect with our landscapes. And I wanted to ask you about your personal healing journey and how you have seen that reflected in your landscapes and what that has looked like for you.
So I spent, I think my depression really set in somewhere in the 2012, 13 timeframe. We started working on it. My physical health was bad. We were already working on diet. And when we moved to the new farm in 2019, we thought it was a clean slate and starting over. Our diet was almost completely organic. We cleaned everything up, a new farm, fresh start. And I just skyrocketed. My physically, I was in good shape. Mentally, I was getting better. And then I had that, Clara talked about it. The farm is a baby that's constantly needing. The farm showed back up, and the financial stresses showed back up. And I went over the cliff in 21, all culminating with Nicole coming in her book. And so up until about 2021, I worked on my mental health doing some of this stuff. And then I worked on the farm doing some of this stuff. And I worked on physical health, and I worked on soul health. And, it was all piecemeal, a little bit at a time. And there were some similarities and some synchronies, but the focus was never as a whole. And after Nicole made that statement that we can't heal the farm without healing the farmer, everything completely clicked. And from that point on, and also there were some underlying things that we knew, but we hadn't admitted it publicly yet because it's really woo-woo and we're weird enough as it is. But we had realized by 2021 that this new farm that we're living on literally and physically recruited us to move here. We were not into that kind of thing at the time, but we sensed it and we felt it. And so by 2021, we had realized that the farm itself brought us here, literally. And we knew we had to figure it out. And I think, that whole thing coming together in 21, first of all, it made me bring that to the front and think about it and talk about it publicly, or at least in our inner circle. And it dawned on me then, this is a beautiful farm. It had been farmed organically for about 15 years before we got here. People walk on here and think it's an absolute paradise, and it is, but it's a farm that has been abused for 200 years, like any other farm in the country. And it's sick and it's hurting. and it needed help. And it knew I needed help. And this farm wants to be a part of this healing movement. And in order to do that, it had to heal also. And it knew I was the one that could do that. And it also knew it was the only one that could heal me. And so that's how we ended up here. And so this farm and I are on a journey together. And we are both, we're not healed, but we're a long ways from the bottom. And we're getting better every day. And the farm is now recruiting people to come. And they are showing up and they tell us, I'm here, but I don't know why. Well, we know why. The farm pulled them here, and we see this farm as a place where people are going to come to spend a night or a week and reconnect with themselves, with their families, with the soil, with the wildlife, with nature, and truly heal the way healing should be. Hospitals are not for healing, farms are. And that's what Lynnette and I and this farm are doing.
Love that. Thank you, Gail.
Hi, this is
I'm
Kimberly. I just have to say, I am so enamored with what you are saying, and I want to come and visit your farm. I will travel wherever I need to. Please put some information in whatever. I'm not a techno wizard, but please put information in a way that I can connect with you. God bless you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Look forward
Kimberly.
to seeing you.
We're sharing throughout the conversation links in the chat. So if you can navigate to that feature and have a look through there, we've shared links to Gail and Lynnette's website, the Fuller Field School, where you can learn more, connect with Gail and Lynnette yourself. There will also be links to our campaign page so that farmers themselves can access the application to apply for a scholarship to the field school, which we'll get to very shortly too. So Mel's just shared that link again, Kimberly. So if you just look in the chat now, you'll be able to find that. And then I wanted to go to you next, Stuart, and just see, because obviously the work that you do focuses very heavily on healing landscapes, and you actually travel around Australia helping other farmers do that. So you must have seen sort of firsthand what that relationship can look like between healing the landscape and healing the farmer. And I just wanted to see if you had sort of any perspectives on that journey yourself.
Yeah, I'd love to touch on Gail with the connection with farms and bringing people to the farms. Some of the farms that I've worked on, they've been farming regeneratively, might be for 20 years, or they may have just started their regenerative journey. I've seen the change in how a husband and wife can hold themselves and be proud of the land, where they're a bit skeptical on, what they've been doing and how they've been farming. And then we come in and we put some leaky weirs and we do some structures in the creek and stuff. And I get the text messages when it rains and the photos of native water rats that they've never seen, and they've been on the farm since the 60s. You see this elevation in how the farm feels, where you drive in the driveway, and I like to walk around farms with no shoes on, because you can tell a lot about previous grazing and farm management by your feet. And you can feel, when you go back there in 12 months time, you can feel that the earth feels different, but the aura or the vibe that comes from the farm or the farmer, it is totally different. And that's, the land is healing, and you can see in the farmers just the way that they talk about the farm and how they're proud to be a farmer and they're proud to be regenerating the landscape. That connection with how your farm is functioning and how your physical and mental health is functioning, you can tell a lot by walking around a farm with bare feet on and seeing how the fencing is, how the grazing is, and without even asking the farmer how their mental health is, you can tell a farmer that has been struggling with their mental health for a long time with the condition of what's happening at the farm. And I've seen firsthand the change in people's farms and people's mental health when they're starting to heal the land. They're seeing the land heal and things change in their own mentality, and they start to heal themselves.
Mm. Amazing. Thanks, Stuart. I wanted to move on to your perspectives, all three of you, of how consumers can support farmers in their mental health journeys. So in terms of what action they can take if they're inspired by this conversation, or what they can do in their day-to-day lives to support farmers in the work that they do and make, you know, these resources more available, or, you know, ease some of those unique pressures that farmers are facing. So Stuart, do you want to keep going and give us your thoughts on that? And then I'll move to
I think,
Clara.
yeah, I think we need to get to the farmers markets. You know, I'll say it. I think the two big supermarkets in Australia aren't very nice to the farmers, and they can, you know, they can stick it where the sun doesn't shine. And let's get up early and get down to those farmers markets and support the farmers. And when we had a small stint doing direct to consumer and owning a butcher shop, when you get messages from someone to say, hey, we just had some of your preservative-free sausages. The kids don't normally eat all their sausages, and we really love your meat. When you get those comments, or you're at a farmer's market and someone comes up and says, oh, we're here last month and we got some of your meat, you know, it's the best beef we've ever eaten. When it's 8 o'clock at night and you're pulling a calf with the headlights and it's raining and you're wondering, why am I doing this? When you get those comments and those phone calls, that's when you can relate back to that and say that this is why we're doing it. And we're doing it so we can feed people nutrient dense food. And that's why we do it. So get to the farmer's market and do as much direct to consumer, buy straight from the farmer. The middleman and the supermarkets are taking so much away from the farmers. So the more we can do direct to consumer, the more that we can really help the farmers make a fair quid what they deserve.
Yeah, amazing. And we're seeing more and more availability in terms of farmers markets popping up in more areas or with more frequency, or I'm noticing that in my region. So there's definitely evidence that interest from the consumer is growing in connecting with the source of their food. And the more we have these conversations, I think, you know, the more we'll see that start to be supported even more so. And there's, you know, obviously not everyone can get to, in their schedule, cannot always get to the right place at the right time to access food in that way, but there's more, there's other options available as well for direct to consumer. So whether that's finding your closest farm online, visiting farm gates, you know, fresh food, that what they're able to do in terms of delivery now is amazing, fresh, frozen. So there's definitely a lot more options available for the consumer, because it's been very easy in the past to say, well, I can't necessarily get down there on a Tuesday morning to that location, but there's other ways now as well. So and it's very easy to seek those out, you know, if you're just asking the right questions and looking in the right places. Clara, did you want to add to that as well, what you see as sort of ways that consumers can support a more community supported agricultural systems?
Yeah, simply connect with farmers by any means possible. The fundamental question that I ask real farmer care recipients is, what does care and support look like to you? And it is a question that rarely do we get asked. It's always, people like to assume what that might be. And I think it's so critically important that you ask a farmer directly, what does care and support look like to you? What is it that you need? And sometimes they may not be able to answer that right away, and that's okay, but keep asking. I think it really, you've got to put that emphasis and attention back on the farmer and allow them to advocate for what they need.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about making a farmer feel seen and feel heard, because, you know, these struggles that we've been talking about, often they struggle in silence and they don't feel like the consumer is sort of looking out for their best interests. So if you can connect in person and have that, you know, direct connection with your farmer, like Stuart was saying, them just feeling seen and heard and their work recognized, that, you know, they're doing what they do to feed our communities nutrient dense food. And I think even just that acknowledgement, which is something that we're hoping to achieve, you know, throughout the month by sharing these stories and these voices, is just to let farmers really know that we see them and we hear them and we have deep gratitude for the work that they're doing. Gail and Lynnette, did you want to add anything to how you see consumers being able to support, you know, the recovery and the healing journey of our farmers?
I think, yeah, I just have to reiterate what Stuart and Clara both said, was that, you know, every time you purchase from a farmer at a farmer's market, or you go to the farm and you buy from the farmer, that is just unbelievably important to those farmers, because they realize that somebody truly does care. You know, that they would drive to your farm, you know, to pick up an order or whatever, you know, and truly tell that farmer how important they are to them. Because a lot of times we forget that these farmers do this 24 hours a day. I mean, the length of the day is crazy sometimes for them, especially during the growing season. And so, you know, how do you make them feel like they're important to you, you know?
I think all of these are fabulous answers, but I think we've got to take it a little further, because to me personally, I get asked all the time what the regenerative ag movement is or how you define it. And it's always earthworms and soil health and maybe nutrient dense food. And I don't believe, those are all just tools. To me, this whole movement is about a complete overhaul of the system. This isn't just about changing the way we're growing food. We have to overhaul consumerism. We have to overhaul education. We have to overhaul government and policy. We've got to overhaul the entire system. I mean, yeah, we can't continue hauling food to a farmer's market and hope that, you know, a certain percent of the people that aren't at work for those 3 hours on a Saturday, by the way, can show up. You know, consumers have got to slow down. They have to slow down and start spending money on things that are a priority, and that's food, air, and water. And so we've got to make major changes on our end, but they've also got to meet us part way, because Clara talked about it. You know, the stress of farming is bad enough, and yet we're also having to market and deliver and prep and all those things to make a buck. And then I think one other thing I think is really important, and I think Clara kind of hit on it earlier, you know, go meet your farmer. Clara talked about burnout. So don't just go to the market, but if you do, meet your farmer. Try to go see the farm or make a point to go to the farm. And for many, way too many people, they can't afford our products. And that's got to be changed as well, because I'm not here to cater to the rich. I want to feed the world. I want to feed all of them. And if you don't have the money to purchase our products, well, what do you have? What skills do you have that we need? You know, are you a seamstress? Are you an IT whiz? You know, can you be a farm setter? Our biggest need on this farm, and most farms like us, we can't take a day off to go to a conference or even go to dinner and a movie and spend the night in a motel because we have animals. Leaving the farm is impossible. And I love this farm and I love my job, but 24/7, 365 isn't sustainable. And finding somebody to take care of it is almost impossible.
Amazing. That's an excellent suggestion. I'd love to put my hand up to sit your farm, Gail and Lynnette, next time I'm over there. But no, it's great to think outside the box, and like you say, like, vote with your dollar for sure, and spend your money with intention, and when you can't, look for other ways to support our farmers. There's a saying that puts it into perspective for me as well, which most people have probably heard, but it's once in your life you need a doctor, a lawyer, a policeman, and a preacher, but every day, 3 times a day, you need a farmer. And that just really, drives home how integral it is that we prioritize the well-being of our land stewards, because they're responsible for the well-being of the rest of us. So with a few minutes left, we've eaten into question time a little, but if anyone had a question that they'd like to ask any of our farmers today or the group, now would be the time to either drop it in the chat briefly or raise your hand if you know how to use that feature, or take yourself off mute and just jump in if you'd like to add something. Mel has been sharing links throughout the chat to the campaign, which we've mentioned, which is running throughout the month of May on the Farmers Footprint website and social media, email list as well, which you're hopefully on if you've received the webinar link today. Through those links, you can learn more about the campaign. You can donate to support if you feel so called, or if you're a farmer, which I'm guessing many of you are today, you can apply to receive some of those benefits. So for our North American-based farmers, we are offering places in the Fuller Field School to join Gail and Lynnette on farm. There's an application link to apply for that. There's also the Real Farmer Awards, of course, offered through Real Farmer Care, Clara's organization. So $100 self-care awards handed out to those who maybe don't have a farm sitter just yet and can't take that time away. Perhaps, those awards can be used to access immediate relief, whether it's, going to a therapy session or a yoga class or a dinner with family, whatever that looks like for you. And then there is another option for our global or international farmers, as well as our local farmers, which is a mental health support service in terms of a platform called Liberate. So we are connecting farmers with this resource to participate in a pilot program of such, which runs for 3 months. So farmers that may not be able to receive support in person can opt to take part in this 3-month program, which is made up of weekly sessions in group settings and coaching settings. And at the end, because it is a pilot, you'll actually receive a stipend for your time. So there's actually a payment at the end of that 3 months for the farmer to thank them for participating. And then hopefully, there's great benefit there for those that do opt for that option. So if we had any questions pop up, it doesn't look like it. You can always connect with us after the call through our social media, Instagram. You can connect with our farmers through their socials as well. And always feel free to send us an email.
Hi, this is Kimberly. May I say something?
Yeah, of course, Kimberly.
Thank you all so much. I'm honored to have been able to be on this call. And I think I got it through a connection with SecBush. I'm not even sure. But I want to commend the farmers out there, because you are the future of this world. And we, those who don't farm right now, do not fully understand how we are going to need to incredibly depend on you in the years that come. So thank you so much for all that you do. And I really appreciate it. And I look forward to participating more as we go forward. So thank you so much. God bless you all.
And then now I think we have one more question from Melanie. If great, Mary, by the way, if we have a couple extra minutes to go over.
Yeah. Hey, Melanie's Unite. So I have a question for Gail and all the other farmers here. If you guys are always looking for help, I know there's the Wolf International. I remember when I was leaving college, us students were looking to do that, to go work on organic farms just for experience. So that way you can take a break or get free help. So I'm just wondering if you guys are open to that.
That's complicated, I'll say, but yes, that's great.
Yeah, no, tell me because I only know it as a person that used it. So what's the backstory?
Well, I'll just quickly say, I mean, for someone trying to manage and run a farm, having skilled, knowledgeable labor is so critical. And so the training involved can just, yeah, it's time consuming. It's can be challenging. As amazing as it also is, it also can disrupt the business aspect of a farm.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, it's many times it's 2 or 3 days of training for a day off, and no guarantee the training will pan out.
Exactly.
Mm. Did we have any other questions?
Hi, this is Kimberly again. Sorry. I just want to tell the farmers that the wolf experience that I had in Italy was amazing. And yes, it was a little more taxing on the producer, but what it did was ignited a spark in me of really wanting to make sure that I support agricultural processes all over the world. And so while it does require a lot on your part, if you can instill that desire in other people, I think there's a benefit to that, even though that it may not benefit you immediately. What you are doing is creating people who are interested in this whole process for the future.
Agree.
Thanks, Kimberly. All right, well, we're at time. So if there's no other questions, I want to thank Clara, Gail, Lynnette, and Stuart once again for joining us today, for taking time off farm to have this really important conversation, and for everyone else that's tuned in, for giving us your time and your energy as well. It means the world to our farmers, you know, for them to be able to see, to feel seen and heard. And, you know, I hope that everyone's been able to take away something, whether you're a farmer yourself or a consumer, you know, so that we can all contribute to the regeneration of our farmers and our landscapes. Thanks for coming, everyone.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.